The Queer Family Podcast. Love is love on the Queer Family Podcast. Love is love on the Queer Family Podcast. Love is love on the Queer Family Podcast. Love is love.
This episode is brought to you by our newest Patreon members, Ariel and Chris Lefkowitz, Laurie Kite, and Sarah Lynn Salisbury Jones. I think I got all those names right.
I think you did great.
Yes. Thank you. I couldn't do this without you. I am so grateful to all of you for making this show a possibility, like big time. Huge.
Big.
Hello, Sophia.
Hi, Jamie.
Oh my God. Y'all, this episode, I'm calling it my ally episode.
Which makes me feel, I don't know. Do I deserve that title? I hate when people give themselves that title. But if
I'm giving it to you.
Okay.
You're an ally. You're an
I take it.
Here's the deal. Sophia is straight, but we forgive her.
The horror. And I'm like, super straight. It's really upsetting.
No, but you're not, though. No, but you're not, because, I don't know anything that happens in the bed. I'm not going to say that.
That's another podcast.
That's a whole nother situation.
Day.
I know nothing about what happens in your bed.
No.
But you listen to the Queer Family Podcast
Religiously.
I know.
And I give you notes.
So, okay, wait.
Y'all, you're lucky this is the first time I've been on here because, 5 years now? I'm like, Jamie, I listened to the episode. I have some comments.
No, for reals. Like, for reals. Wait. You have to give the audience your elevator pitch of who you are and, like, why you're here. Go. No pressure.
No pressure. My name is Sophia Townsend,
Mm-hmm.
born and raised New York,
Mm-hmm.
raised by my mother, Nanette,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad, Bill, who we're going to get into.
We're going to get into that.
We're going to get into that. My bio dad is Robert, but my actual father who did the work, Bill. Yes. Gay man. Unfortunately died of AIDS back when we almost didn't really know what AIDS was. But yeah, that's my real dad.
Yeah. And you're an avid listener of the podcast.
Yep.
And we met because our kids go to school together.
So to take a step back, my mom is white, my bio dad is black. And when Grayson came out, he was so freaking white.
I know.
And I was like, what is...
You have a white baby.
I have a white male son.
You do. Which,
White.
I know.
Which is, look, my mom is hella white, right?
Yeah.
My mom is super duper white.
She's English.
Like,
Literally.
Blonde hair, blue eyes, colonizer,
She's super white.
Super white.
I love your mom.
Love my mom. My mom's fabulous. But yeah, Grayson's super white. Okay, again, but no, when I'm on the bus with Grayson, I definitely get looks of like, they think that I'm like the nanny.
Oh my God.
And then how, affectionate Grayson is. So he's like hugging me and he's like, Mom this, Mom that. And I'm looking at the people and I'm like, yeah, that's right. I made this white baby. I made him in my body.
You did.
I did.
You made this white baby.
I did. I made a white boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in all the different things that I just love listening to the podcast, and I'm not trying to like put an ad for the
Please
podcast
do.
in the podcast.
I'm actually going to take this clip and put it on social. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I love that it's now become the Queer Family Podcast, that it's not just If These Ovaries Could Talk, because it's a queer family, right? And it's how I relate to the podcast in certain ways. Like there's mirrors and there's windows, right?
Here's the thing.
Sorry, I've never done this before.
No, we're sitting on my bed because the kids are out there, outside the room. So we're holding the mics.
Holding the mics.
Apologies if there's like sound in and out because we're
I'm
moving
going to
our
do a
heads.
better job of holding
No, it's
it
fine.
in front
You're
of
doing
my
good.
face.
You're doing good. You're doing amazing. So there's a reason why you're here to help me introduce this episode today.
Yes,
Because
getting back on topic. Thank you for
this
steering
is
me
the
back,
topic.
Jamie.
This is the topic, and that's why I'm so excited to bring you on. Because, well, first of all, you really do give me notes on it. Like we'll do school drop off. I'm doing school drop off. I'm dropping off my kids, and then I'll see Sophia. She's like, I have notes. I'm like,
I have a comment for season 7, episode 5. Like,
I welcome it.
Yeah.
I welcome.
And now I'm moving on to episode 6, so I'll get you those next.
I absolutely love it, and it means the world to me to have like people I know and love actually listening. It means the world.
Of course.
It really does.
Thank you for putting it out there. It's such important. No, it really is.
Thanks.
It's a beautiful podcast. and it's really important that it exists. So
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fatia, with way too many H's in her name. She has like 4 H's. You try to figure out where they go.
You just throw one in there every once in a while. It's fine.
But okay, the interview that we're introducing, Sophia.
Yes.
Oh my God, this is such a touching, beautiful story.
Such a beautiful, sweet, heartbreaking, beautiful, wonderful expansion of what you understand or what I understand or what anybody should understand as the queer family.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. This is why I'm titling this like the ally episode, because Sophia is also non-queer. We forgive her. Yeah. But no, Sophia's dad came out when Sophia was a teenager.
Yeah.
And she reached out. She wanted to tell the story of kind of how her and her family dealt with that, and they dealt with it beautifully. Just spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Beautiful story.
Beautiful story. And then she did end up losing her father to suicide years later. And so she wanted to talk about that.
I think that going back to me saying this is why I appreciate the change of the title of the program to the Queer Family Podcast, right? Because it's very interesting to me as a mixed race person who was raised by my gay non-bio dad. It's just been interesting in my life I'm so readily accepted by the queer community. I've always been so readily accepted by the Black community. It's the white, cis, heteronormative, like we are the community. They're the ones who always like, but what about, but what? And it's interesting to hear another person's story of how like they came to be in the queer community, not because they themselves were queer, and how accepted they were in that community.
When they lose that gateway to the community, also in such a tragic way, how do you stay connected to the community when you don't yourself identify as, but you are the community? And I think it's a conundrum that a lot of kids of queer parents face when they grow up as well. If they're not queer, right? It's like, how do I fit in? Do I still fit in here? But I identify so strongly as a queer family member.
Well, that's it. My whole life. So, it's interesting for me and Sophia. It's sort of like a mirror story, but not like a reflection. It's like how do you call that? Like a opposite
like
mirror.
A flip.
Like a flip of the mirror. Like I said, my bio dad is Robert, but my dad is Bill. And he was out before I was born. So that part, was a little bit different for me. He was always my dad. And I was always in the queer community. Every Christmas, every holiday, it was always at his house. He had the most handsome boyfriends. Can I just tell you? So frustrating. I have so many memories of like walking into his house, and I'm like little straight girl walking to the house, and I see this like super cute boy like sitting on the couch, and I was like, who's that? And my mom was like, that's Bill's boyfriend. I was like, God dang it. Every time.
Wrong tree. Wrong tree.
Climbing up the absolute wrong tree. But then, I'm born in 76. Unfortunately, HIV AIDS came on the scene. We didn't even know what it was in the beginning. We didn't know how it was transferred from person to person. And then it got really bad. And then he was gone. He died when I was 14. And then I just lost all those Christmases. I lost all the
boyfriends,
all the cute boyfriends. I think it's great nowadays that I think there is a more open understanding of things like chosen family and community, and that you don't have to have this one thin thread that connects you, and that when that thread snaps, it's gone. But at the time, it was, and his parents weren't super supportive of him. So while he recognized me as his daughter and I recognized him as my dad, his parents didn't see that. So it was just done, So it was lovely to listen to Sophia's story and see hear how she was able to continue to connect with that community. And, I have made a conscious effort to, try to listen to queer stories, watch queer movies, because I don't want to lose that connection.
Yeah.
But then of course, organically also I just have friends.
Right. Yeah. You live in New York City.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
It'd be hard
we're
not
all
to.
gay. We're all freaking gay. Let's be real.
Yeah.
We're all a little bit gay, except you. I don't know what happens in your bed, but
Dang it.
except you.
Sorry.
No, but no, it's true. And you always bring up such amazing points and great points, and you make me think, and I really do appreciate that. And when you give me notes, I'm like, oh shit, what's she gonna say? Because she's gonna be totally right. For real, I'm not even joking. This has been a pleasure, and I want you back a million times over. And I think that there is room for the allies.
Well, thank you.
Especially in the Queer
that.
Family Podcast.
I appreciate
You're a
that.
part
Thank you.
of the family.
Wait, Helen and Beulah, before you roll that tape, this is Jamie's daughter, Rose.
And her friend Grayson. You should join the Queer Family Podcast Patreon.
Yeah, you should.
She's always working. I've seen it myself with my own eyes.
You'll do a good thing and get bonus content. I mean, who doesn't want bonus content?
Yeah, like behind the scenes stuff and all of that.
Video episodes dropped a day early, people. A day. It's big time.
And anything else Jamie can think of to entertain all of you, everyone watching this podcast.
Especially the people across the world. Yes, I'm looking at you guys. No, not really. Just go to patreon.com/The Queer Family Podcast and join now.
That's patreon.com/The Queer Family Podcast. Thank you all for joining on this podcast, and we're the Queer Family.
You slay. Mic drop.
Love is love.
Hi, Sophia.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. It's great to have you here. Where are you zooming in from?
I am zooming in from Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville. Fun. Love
Yeah.
that. All right. Well, let's just jump right into it. Let's not waste any time shooting any shit. We're going to jump right into your elevator pitch of who you are and why you are here. Are you ready?
Okay, amazing. I will give it my best shot.
You got this. You got this.
Okay.
Girl. On your mark. Get set. Go.
Okay, great. My name is Sophia. I am the daughter of a gay man and a straight woman who were married for about 18 years. And when I was 15, my dad came out as gay. And we were learning how to live as this kind of blended, queer, straight, mixed family. And then when he was 51, he passed away. He died by suicide. When I am not talking about my family, I'm a writer based in Nashville, and I love writing about the things that I've gone through with them.
You did it. And you got some heavy stuff in there. So those of you at home, we're going to be talking about some heavy stuff, mental health, and how hard coming out can be and all the things. And also Sophia's dog is here to lend a voice in case you hear a dog in the background.
Whether or not he was invited or not, he is present.
You know what I noticed though? Your dog made a sound right when you mentioned your dad passing, which was, I found, synchronistic, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah. They know things. I don't know what they know, but they definitely know.
They do know. Yeah. And I'm sorry you lost your dad that way. It's a terrible way to lose someone. We're going to get into that, but I would also just love to get into the beginning. Take us to where you want to start in this story. Let's talk about it.
Okay, yeah, great. I'll give a quick backstory on kind of how I grew up in late 90s, early 2000s in very suburban, like traditional, I would say cookie cutter in like a straight family.
Non-queer. That's how we say non-queer.
Non-queer. We grew up like across the street from my grandparents from the house that my dad grew up in. So it was like very insulated. And yeah, I have one younger brother. I grew up around a really big Italian family. And the first 15 years of my life were just very, as I expected it would be, based on all the families and life that I saw around me. And then when I was 15, my brother was 13, my dad came out, my parents sat us down together and my mom said, Dad and I are getting a divorce and Dad is going to tell you why. And they kind of did this like choreography, like they were seated, my brother and I were seated kind of on the floor on this little step into our living room. And my mom was sitting on an ottoman right in front of us, like looking at us at eye level. And then when she said that, she got up. My dad took that same spot and he just immediately, his eyes filled with tears. And he immediately said, I have something to tell you. I'm a gay man. And just started crying. And we all started crying. And it was like, I always say, like, it wasn't shocking in the sense that once he said that, I was kind of like, oh, this makes sense. Like, And there was also this kind of split second between my mom saying we're getting divorced and he's going to tell you why, where I was like, I don't know, kids know things. I'm like, I know that if they're getting divorced, this is why. Yeah. And then after that, you know, it was a really tough process because, I mean, I think everybody was learning a lot. And it was really important to my brother and I to be supportive of my dad. And we immediately said, like, you know, we're old enough to have a say. We want to have our custody split 50-50 between my parents. And I know immediately that was like, for my dad, I could just see. And then he said later on how much relief he felt that we as his kids were not rejecting him. Yeah, like he was really
I can imagine.
scared.
Oh my God.
So,
that must have been such a hard thing for your father to do.
Yeah, it was. I took a lot of bravery and a lot of work, I think, for him to be able to get to that point and share that, especially with us.
I want to ask, you said that you kind of knew, like, what was it about your dad that made you have an inkling of an idea? Is that something?
Well, he was not. Yeah, of course, he was not like other dads. And it's like, you know, of course, some of these things are just stereotypes and get into like everyone looks very different and acts very different. But he was like the biggest Madonna fan ever. And he like, he would like schedule our whole family to get like our hairy Italian eyebrows waxed together, like back to back. You know what I mean?
Including himself.
Yes, including himself, most importantly. And so this was like the era of, haven't heard this word in years, but at the time it was like metrosexual was the term. And we're like, oh, dad's just metrosexual. Like he's into grooming and he's into shopping and he's into like diva pop stars and things like that. And not into sports and things that you don't have to be gay to be into. But he definitely stood out amongst the dads that I knew and I was around. And I had people ask. I was 15 and I had a boyfriend who was 16, older and wiser.
Yeah, right.
And I remember he said to me once, he was like, Sophia, do you ever think your dad is gay? I'm like, what? Why would I think that? He's married to my mom. He's like, yeah, but he wears scarves.
He wears scarves. Oh, I love it. I love it.
So that was he was my boyfriend at the time that they split up, and that was an interesting text to send when I was like, well, hate to say that you were right about the scarves.
Your scarf hunch was right on. Oh my God, that's hilarious.
So yeah, it's all these things that are kind of silly and like don't indicate sexuality, but indicated at the time difference. And you know, he was also more effeminate in his speech and just like I don't quite know how to talk about it in a way that doesn't sound just like stereotypes, but it was kind of, those were the like surface level clues of
what was on the inside, right? What was happening. I mean, stereotypes exist for a reason. They're not always right. You know, and no, we cannot fall back on them and say this is why, but they do exist for a reason. So it's okay. You have a pass here. And it's your dad, and you're speaking of your experience with your dad. So you tell your parents, we want 50-50 custody. We want to be with both of you. Dad's relieved. How about mom? How's mom handling it?
Mom is struggling. This was like they were very united in the beginning and really emphasized like we're still a family. We're just gonna look different than the other families around us look, and like what we used to look like, which I found really comforting and was a really beautiful sentiment. But then it was a really hard thing to also live up to. In the beginning, we sort of continued like business as usual as a group of 4, except dad's gay, mom's not, and would celebrate birthdays together and holidays, and were much more integrated. And then as they went through the legal divorce process, which I know you've done some episodes on divorce, and divorce is just awful, you know, made things worse just going through that. And also, I think some of the shock wore off, and my mom was struggling more with feelings of betrayal and like not just the family and the kids, but what that meant for herself and the relationship that she'd had for, 20 years. So their relationship grew more strained over time. I think it kind of like all of the pain and shock and complication of it, to me, it felt like it settled in. And then it was like, oh, now we have to deal with it because it's like simmering rather than the beginning was kind of a softer thing.
And that makes sense. I mean, divorce is really tough. That realization must have been such a shock. No matter how much anyone knew or thought beforehand, it's still a huge blow and a huge shock, and your whole family is changing. Did you have queer families in your community or queer folks?
Not that I knew of. There was a family I went to school with. I went to like a small one class size Catholic school, and I had a classmate who he had two dads, but my understanding was like the dad's was his dad, and then he also lived with his uncle and cousins, and like the two biological kids were cousins and they lived with their uncles. And I just never thought anything strange of that. And it was, actually fairly recently. And I'm like, wait, they were not uncles.
They were not. So the story was that, no, that's my dad and that's my uncle. But no, those were two men together.
Yes.
Oh, wait. So
yes.
okay.
No, they were together, but what they told people and what I understood was, my classmate lives with his dad and another man who is his uncle. But
so the family was not out for whatever reason, and possibly that had to do with the community that you were in and also the time. Yeah. Okay, so you have no blueprint for this.
No blueprint. No.
Yeah. All right. So what happens? How does it go?
Yeah, like I said, the divorce part was hard. I felt really protective of my dad. I had so much respect for him coming out, and I was really proud of him in a lot of ways. And then I think another component to it was I knew from being a child when I was younger that he had suffered from depression, and he was in and out of the hospital for a period of time when I was about 11, and it was very, again, a thing that I just didn't really understand, but very confusing of like, dad's not well and he's gone and he's back and he's gone. So I do think I also had a little bit of fear around like, is he going to be okay? And he moved to a little like condo apartment super close to my mom's house. They all stayed within 5 minutes driving, and we would go back and forth. I mean, he had been an open person. He's like a very charismatic, friendly person, but he definitely got more open with my brother and I after he came out about how hard it was, about his mental health. We talked about that more. And it was really important at that age, being in high school and just seeing most parents around me, their model of parenting and what I had been more familiar with was more style of like giving information and kind of being an example and telling you what to do and not do. But my dad, particularly after he came out, I think got really good at kind of coming down to the level of a teenager who's anxious and confused and doesn't know what's going on. And he was much more like, yeah, like I've made mistakes. I didn't realize I needed therapy. And then it was really helpful. And he just became a lot more human to me. And I think it's a combination of how he was evolving after coming out and also the time in life of like the way that our relationship was changing at that age.
You were going through it together. I mean, he was, you were going through teenage years, that which it's in and of itself is a whole nut to crack. And he was in his own metamorphosis. So you went through it kind of together. And it's kind of beautiful that he was able to come down to your level and you could experience these awakenings together.
Yeah. He was kind of going through similar life milestones at the same time I was. Like, going on dates with
Mhm.
men. Like, so was I. So if you could call high school boys men, but
Getting your eyebrows done together for the
getting
date.
eyebrows. Right. Exactly. So that was really interesting too. If he didn't move away from this town that he'd grown up in, that he'd spent his whole life. And I mean, I give him so much credit for that, because I think my instinct in that situation would be like, now I'm going to flee to like the big city or something.
Right.
And instead he was, he had to come out to people who had known his parents and siblings for his entire life, and stay within that community. And so that was also tough, because there was not much of a like active, visible gay community around us. And so he looked for that in, we lived fairly close to New York, and he kind of would go back and forth there. But he just started trying to date people, and he found pretty quickly that he connected most, even when he would date people and it wouldn't be like a romantic thing. He made a lot of friends through starting to date men, and he connected with a lot of men who had similar experiences of having been married to a woman and coming out later in life. And so I started building this micro community of people who had that experience that was unique and specific, but also I learned was like fairly common, like something that a lot of people went through.
Kind of like non-queer expats.
Yes.
Straight expats.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. So you kind of watched him come into himself.
Mm-hmm. Even just from the way that we were verbal about it at the time. Like, I wanted people to know, and would like tell people pretty quickly. I mean, I told my friends when they got divorced right away, and I felt like it was a really important thing when I was meeting new people, that I wanted to like find a way to share in some way, and didn't want to like take people off guard, and also kind of felt a sense of pride. And I think I felt a sense that if I didn't share that, there was something like I'm hiding this about my dad, and I didn't want to feel like, I never wanted to feel ashamed of him, or act in a way that like demonstrated that. But my brother was much more reserved. Like, I don't think he necessarily told his friends. He was in middle school. He was a boy. Like, it was just a different thing.
Yeah.
And he was not, if he had friends over and it came up, or my dad that said something, it wasn't like he would get upset, or it wasn't like a secret, but he wasn't as like expressive about it, even with his friends.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. We all handle things differently, right?
Totally.
So your dad is dating, you're dating. And then what happens? Like, do you feel like you start becoming kind of a part of this community of straight expat men?
Yeah, I think that, again, it was in these sort of like micro doses. My dad was very much a homebody in some ways. He loved like having a beautiful home, and he loved cooking and hosting. So I just got to know these people that he dated or were friends with through these kind of intimate, like homey environments, and felt like I also knew a lot about their kids and their experiences, even when I didn't meet their children. There are a few who I did meet, but for the most part, I didn't end up getting to know any of the like parallel version of me. But it was really like, it felt really good to kind of just know that out in the world there were other families, men like my dad, and kids like me, teenagers like me, who were figuring this out and like doing well and just existing, because it was something that I didn't really see. I think that was the biggest thing. It was just the visibility, and my dad got much more into, he like started his subscription to The Advocate, and would, we would watch more queer movies together. And so it was kind of like, felt this cultural, just bringing it in little ways that really opened. I think opened my mind isn't the best phrase, because it was like not a problem of knowing that existed, but not just not seeing it and feeling like kind of on an island, and then having those like little things that really made a difference of feeling like, oh, we're part of a larger community in different ways.
Right. And you're getting embraced by this community, and your representation matters so much. You're seeing it out there and it's making you feel better. And you went from this cookie cutter in the box family to a very outside the box family, and are learning how beautiful it can be and
totally
getting embraced by this new community. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
It really
So did your dad ever find somebody that he like really settled down with?
Not that he really settled down with. He had a few like longer term relationships, people that we met and got to know and were around like regularly, but he never, he didn't have a partner at the time that he died. And I know this because he said this very openly, like he really struggled with vulnerability and really good at connecting quickly with people and like enabling them to open up. But I think it was a kind of thing where sometimes he'd be so good at that with like others and then struggled to do that with himself, especially when it was a new part of his life that he was figuring out kind of in real time. And knowing him and the conversations we had and his personality, I think he craved kind of like wishing he figured it out and then he could find like the right partner. And it was hard to do those things at the same time, be dating and learning, as it is for everyone. But
yeah, figuring himself out.
Yeah.
Okay. So take us through what happens.
Yeah. So I went to school in California. I was across the country. But he visited pretty often because he traveled a lot for work and would come out to the West Coast, and we were very close. It was like so much of our relationship over those years was over the phone because I was far, but he was a person who's really good at phone calls. So, when you're just driving in the car, you're on a walk and you're like, I just want to chat. And you have that one go-to person who you call and it's always just going to feel good. So he was always that person. And then the year after I graduated from college, I was 23, and he had been going through a few different things. It was kind of like a combination of he had been in the same kind of mental health treatment from the time that I was a child, and it was a pretty like intensive regimen of medication and things like that. And he wanted to continue to like deepen his gay queer community and switch to doctors who were queer themselves, who would like understand, and a therapist who was gay and things like this. So he was making these big changes, and he was also going through a renegotiation of his divorce settlement with my mom, which was stressful for both of them. And he also had his appendix burst on Christmas Day.
Oh God.
Yeah. And when he had that surgery, they didn't give him his psychiatric meds in the hospital for a few days. And he called me. I was home for Christmas, and he called me and he said, can you bring them to the hospital? And I was like, wait, what? It's a hospital. Why don't they just have medicine? I remember thinking this is really weird that like 2 days post surgery, I am taking your medication to a hospital. And I'm not saying that I'm just putting the scene of there was a lot of destabilizing things going on in his life. And I'll also add context, just content warning as well, but that he was abused as a boy by someone in his family, an older man, which obviously added a lot of complication to his identity and sexuality, and was something that like continued to come up in his mental health. So there was just sort of this storm of factors going on, but he was really open about struggling and taking a step back. And he went into inpatient care. He's like, I feel like I really need this. And then he was taking some time off work and going to outpatient and doing, he had his gratitude journal, he had a sun lamp, he did like the whole thing. But it's actually about to be exactly 5 years. In March of 2018, he took his life and he died by suicide. So it was shocking for me. I mean, I think it's always shocking, I'm going to just say. But like, I've spoken to a lot of people where suicide death, it can feel like it comes out of nowhere. And in this case, like there was a lot going on. He was very destabilized, but he was also so communicative and also trying so many things that in my mind, I just never thought it was a possibility. I don't think you ever really do. But yeah, so I was 23 when he died. There's a lot I can say about that, but one thing that comes to mind, a really strong memory from immediately after was, since my parents were divorced, my brother and I were his next of kin. And when we went to the funeral home with one of our uncles, the funeral home director started talking about writing the obituary. And he said something of like, oh, we deal with this meaning suicides a lot, and we can write the language so it like makes it vague and people don't know. And my brother and I immediately we're in this complete fog, but we're both just like in sync. Absolutely not. Like, we are going to be very honest about this, because like, what a disrespect to my, if anything, like my dad's life was such a testament to doing really hard things, of being more honest and open about yourself and your struggles and who you are. And it was like really important to us to honor that even in his death.
Yeah, about living your truth and doing brave things, right?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry
Thank
you
you.
lost your dad, especially to suicide. Suicide is awful, and we should never lose anybody to suicide. And so I just want to say that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, but I also think it's really wonderful that you reached out and you wanted to share this story, because, I've talked to a couple people this season who have had suicide attempts, and a lot of them say it's these particular people, part of these attempts were because they weren't living their truths. And once they started living their truths, they were able to work through some of that. So I think that there is definitely a connection and a correlation to being able and free to be out and proud and living your truth and saving your own life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this was something that I learned actually after he died. But when I mentioned, being a child and him, I knew that he had depression, but I didn't know until after he died that he had actually attempted suicide as well when I was younger, like 11, and survived. And learning that after the fact, I just, there's so many emotions, but I had this huge, huge sense of gratitude that I got him for longer in my life. And as a young adult, got to know him in that adult relationship, but most importantly, that I got to know him as a gay man and as his true identity. And so, like, I don't mean that in a silver linings way, but in just a way that I was like, oh my God, thank God that I got to know who he really was, and he shared that part of himself with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that happened. You lose your dad. You also had just kind of started becoming a part of this queer community. And so what did that do to that? What did that do for you? Because I know, but the listeners don't know necessarily because we haven't said it, but you don't identify as queer.
Right.
So he was kind of your gateway to your bridge to the queer community. So what happened then?
Yeah, I kind of felt like I became in some ways this keeper of the bridge that he was. And he had a lot of friends who were out and had similar experiences, but he also had a lot of friends who were still closeted or going through their own experiences with sexuality and gender and identity, and like that things that were still closeted for them, that he was a confidant for a lot of people. And when he died, I would get these messages on Instagram from like his friends or someone I never heard of, and be like, hey, you don't know me, but your dad helped me through a lot, or we connected through work, but like had a similar experience. Like, there were just all these little surprise pieces that like I think at the time I didn't quite think of it as a community because I'm like, oh, it's not like some group we're all gathering together, but it was like these individual snippets and stories of people reaching out who knew him, and specifically in ways. And I remember one friend who hadn't shared with his family like his own sexuality, but he told me that, you know, he was queer and my dad had been a huge like supporter and confidant of him. And then a few years later, he like did come out to his family and had it on Facebook and things like that. And I just felt really like I'm like weirdly a part of this because we've had these private conversations as sort of this like gateway of what my dad was serving for people. And it made me feel really happy for him to see that he had like gotten to the point of coming out. So there were just these like interesting little conversations and surprises, and some people who still, you know, will message me or remember my dad's birthday, or remember the anniversary of his death, and who I don't actually know like in person, but have these connections with.
So do you feel a part of the queer community?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I do, but I think it's only recently that I have felt that way, and it's a difficult thing for me to still grapple with, like, how do I feel a part of the queer community, because I've lost that immediate connection to my dad. But being involved in the queer community through queer friends, or just being like an ally and advocate, makes me also feel more connected to my dad. So I think it kind of is like a cycle that feeds in on itself.
Yeah,
like I want to be connected to the community, and I also want to be connected to him, and they both go together.
They're together. I think that you're very similar to like our kids, the kids of queer couples who grow up out of in these queer, they grow up in the LGBTQIA plus community with their parents, and if they don't come out as gay themselves or queer themselves when they grow up, a lot of them talk about the folks that the kids that I've interviewed talk about this huge feeling of loss for having lost that community, and doing whatever they can to kind of keep themselves in the community because it is a part of their parents. And the struggle that they've dealt with to do that. And so I think you're not dissimilar to our kids in that, even though you were kind of thrust in later in life and it was short-lived, but you're a part of the community, and it's a connection to your dad. So you have to stay in the community.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You're welcome here. You're welcome here.
Thank you. It really feels so good to hear.
I mean, it is the best community to be a part of.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know. I mean, we are pretty awesome. We love rainbows.
Yeah, what could be? I mean, what's better than that? I remember, this is a little story that just always makes me feel good. With living in Nashville, I have a lot of queer friends, and they were forming a queer book club, and they're like, "Oh, Sophia, you should come." And I'm like, "Oh, I would love to, but I don't want to be in like a space that I'm not, taking up space, and I don't identify as queer and whatever." And like, "Oh no, you're half gay. It's fine. You're 50%. Like, you just come on in." And I was like, the just like lightheartedness of the joke, but also the welcoming nature of that just was like made me feel really good, and realize that there are like so many different ways that I can be connected, and also how welcoming people are.
I love that. And you said that you have like some of his letters.
I do, yeah. He was big into letter writing,
and he wrote you letters while he was like throughout his process of coming out. And
yeah, he typically wrote letters on big events like my 8th grade graduation and some Christmases and high school and college graduation. And they're all so special and beautiful to me. But I would love to share some of the letter he wrote, which is from Christmas 2010. That was the year after he came out, or the year that he did come out, the first Christmas. And he wrote it to me and my brother together. Usually he wrote us our own letters, but he said, I wanted to share the same message. So I will read a few pieces of it, if that's okay.
I would love that. Yes. I'm getting, I need tissue. I think I'm going to need
I might cry on this. I will warn you.
Me too.
So he says, this has been a difficult year, and this is our first Christmas where our family is not entirely whole. As well adjusted as you both seem to our new normal, I'm sure it hasn't been easy for you. Each of us has a vision of the way life is supposed to be, and I realize that this is not exactly what any of us may have imagined. I want you to know how proud I am of both of you for handling this dramatic change in our lives the way you have, and how grateful I am that you accepted me as your gay dad. I won't bore you with the difficulties I have faced in coming to this realization, but I do want you both to know that this is not something that has come easily, and do not take the impact this has had on our family lightly. I also want you to know that I truly love Mom, and that our marriage was rooted with good intentions and was filled with a tremendous amount of love, much of which emanated from that joy that you have given us. There's a lot of good stuff. I don't want to go on too long, but I will read another little section where he says, I recently watched a TV program featuring an interview with a gay woman who struggled with anorexia and who struggled with coming out as an adult. She said something that stuck me as so insightful and so very powerful that I would like to share it with you. It went like this. I used to think that the way to be strong was to be tough. I used to think that to be independent was to not need anyone, but I have learned that the more vulnerable you are and the softer you are, and the more you allow people into your life and into your heart, the happier you are and the more valuable you are to other people. And then he says, to me, her message tells us how much we as human beings need to stay connected, how we need to have people in our lives that we can lean on and who can lean on us, people that we can confide in and not feel embarrassed or ashamed. But I think the most important part of the message is that if you trust and truly allow people in, you will have full, rich, and deep relationships that bring you great joy and will in turn allow you to bring joy to others. So while this Christmas may not be what we are accustomed to, we still have many gifts in our lives that make us whole, and the greatest gift I could ever have asked for, oh no, so cry, is to know that there are these two amazing, loving, funny, and talented people in my life who are my children.
That's so sweet. I'm crying. You can cry too. Just let it out.
Just gonna, but yeah.
Well, it's
a
just
couple pages, but those were some of them.
The
excerpts. Yeah.
Words to live by, and it's just so wonderful that you have these words of his to revisit in times of need, or just when you want to feel close to him. I think he gave you a great gift. He gave you the gift of being himself, and that's priceless.
Totally. So priceless.
Well, thank you so much. That touched my heart, and I'm so glad you came to tell your story. You're not alone. There's many of you out there. So you're part of the community.
I'm grateful. Thank you. And I'm really glad to be here and share with you and hear the stories that you tell of other queer families, because all of this, like you said, it just is so important. And so the visibility, the stories matter so much. And, especially just like day to day, I'm in Tennessee and we have nonsense going on with laws and queer families. And so like when I get to listen to your podcast and hear hopeful stories, it's really important.
Oh, well, thank you. It means the world to hear that. Yeah. And especially with the laws that are going down and affecting trans folks, and them being told that they're not going to be able to live their truths and be the people they need to be is just insane. So these stories very much matter. Agreed. Agreed. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Love is love is love is love.
Well, folks, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. What a good story. But the conversation is not over, folks. Be sure you're following the show on all the socials. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at the Queer Family Podcast. You're going to get photos of all the guests there, some videos, and just, all around fun from yours truly. Who doesn't want that? Don't miss out. You don't want FOMO. Nobody wants FOMO. And don't forget to join me on Patreon to help me create this super important queer content. You're going to head to patreon.com/the Queer Family Podcast to sign up and get that bonus content. And one more thing, if you love this show and want to represent your love for us and our beautiful families, you need to head to our shop and get some Queer Family Podcast merchandise. We've got so many We've got so many designs, and you can put these designs on any product in the store. We've got t-shirts, mugs, hoodies, notebooks, face masks, laptop cases. You're just going to go to tpublic.com and search for the Queer Family Podcast. Or you can find our store at link in bio on our Instagram page. Or you can find the shop on our website at thequeerfamilypodcast.com. There's so many ways, so many ways. All right, folks, that's it for this week. Tune back in next week for another episode all about family, but with Gay.